Hello there, friends and kin. I hope you're well. My sincere apologies for missing our appointment last week. I've got a funny story to tell you. So I came out here to our designated spot at the designated time. I set up my phone. I hit the record button. I started talking, started reading, and I went on for about 20 minutes. Then I hit the stop button, collected all my things, went home, sat down and got ready to upload to YouTube, only to find that there was no video on my phone. However, when I looked at the newest files on my phone's memory, there were two images. One of what I looked like before I started talking, and one of what I looked like when I was saying goodbye. My dumb ass forgot to put my phone on video mode, and it was on camera mode. So I gave a lecture to to, to simply the dead congregated around me. Not the first time I have made that mistake, and probably won't be the last in the grand scheme of things. So needless to say, today I double checked and made sure that I was actually on video mode. It feels very much like an old man kind of mistake. And when I realized what I had done, I said, that's very much the kind of thing done by somebody who is not as acquainted with technology as they probably should be. And I believe the subject's been addressed in some previous videos, but I'm sure anybody watching me can readily see that I don't do a lot of fancy edits. I don't do a lot of technological production. It's literally just videos of me talking. And several of my viewers that I speak with one-on-one regularly, they've told me that it adds a personal touch. It feels more like a conversation and less like a presentation, which is exactly the kind of feel I'm going for. But it's also because, I am certainly not as technologically talented as a lot of other content creators out there. And maybe it is just because I'm getting older, and I just can't keep up with it. But either way, I had a laugh, and I said, "Well, I'll just have to make it up next Sunday." So here I am making it up. And you may wonder why I always talk about whatever cigar I'm smoking. Whenever I'm out and about and I fire up a cigar somewhere, inevitably somebody will always come up and say, "What you smoking?" And there have been several posts I've made over the years on my Facebook or Instagram where I've got a cigar going or my pipe lit, and inevitably there's always that comment of "What you smoking?" So I figured I'd just go ahead and answer that question for any who may want to ask, and that gets that out of the way. So today it would be the New World by AJ Fernandez, and this is particular the Cameroon selection. I love Cameroon wrapper. That's one of my favorite wrapper leaves for cigars. And for the most part, that came about from when I was first kind of moving around the world of cigars, and the first several cigars that I really liked and started smoking on a regular basis was Arturo Fuente, specifically the 858, the Hemingway, and the Don Carlos line. And to this day, those are some of my favorite cigars. So they started, when I first started exploring the passion of cigars, those were my first favorites and have remained my go-to favorites up to this day. And, a lot more companies over the years have started using Cameroon, and I can appreciate most of them. But AJ, AJ did just a stand-up job with this blend, and it's in my regular rotation. So now that we've got the love of the leaf out of the way, let's get to today's reading. So the reading of the Carmina Magistra from Roger Horne's Witch's Devil went over really well. I got a lot of positive feedback on that one, and I had several individuals hit me up in my DMs talking about how they really enjoyed the reading and discussion of it. They had a copy of the book, and one individual even bought a copy after listening to a few episodes of our reading, and decided they wanted to give the whole book a whirl. And they've since fallen in love with it just as much as I have. It's a wonderful, wonderful book to get to know the Witch Father a little bit better. So I figured if that went over well, why don't we go back to the basics with Roger Horne? And I'm going to start pulling readings out of Roger Horne's Folk Witchcraft, which is his 101 book. And as far as books to recommend somebody new to traditional or folkloric witchcraft, this is right up there in my top 5 picks. I can't tell you right now exactly what my top 5 picks would be. I've never thought it out before, but this one, definitely The Crooked Path by Keldon, be another good one. Traditional Witchcraft, A Cornish Book of Ways by Gemma Gary, another excellent one. And then I'd have to think on what the other two would be in my top 5, but those 3 titles right there, you're not going to be led astray. That's gonna make for a solid foundation for you to build on. And all 3 of those books are just written very well for somebody who has no previous working knowledge of witchcraft. There's a lot of other good books on traditional craft out there, but those 3 that I just named in particular are some of the best for beginners. So they, from the moment you crack open the first page, the author is not operating under the assumption that you have a background in witchcraft. They're talking to you as if this is a brand new subject, and they manage to do it without sounding condescending. That's the other ticket. Not only do they present material aimed at people with no background in witchcraft, they do so without it feeling like they're talking down to you. And that's really important. As soon as I feel like an author is talking down to me, it's an immediate turn off. And I start to gradually care less and less about what they have to say. And I've encountered that on multiple occasions. I'm not going to go into the authors that do that, because I think anybody who picks these books up is smart enough to understand when somebody believes they're better than you. And if you ever feel that way about a book, my honest recommendation is put it down, because once that seed is planted, it's sort of like seeing something you can't unsee. Now over the years, I feel like I've gotten to a point where, I can tolerate that a little bit better, especially if there's information in a book that I really want. But it just makes the process of reading not enjoyable. So, but again, those 3 books, Crooked Path, Traditional Witchcraft, A Cornish Book of Ways, and Folk Witchcraft, definitely not condescending. They're not talking down to you. And we're going to start off in the introduction, because I love the picture that Roger Horne paints. And it will perfectly, within the first couple of paragraphs, it's going to paint the picture that I'm talking about, where you can readily tell that Horne is not talking down to you. He is having a conversation with you. Let's imagine that we aren't miles apart. We're sitting by a fire, looking out into the mysterious night. It's All Hallows Eve, so there's a chill in the wind, and the branches of the trees are bare. The stars are bright. Embers from the fire catch on the wind in bright flurries, drifting up into the yawning dark like fireflies. We're here to talk about witchcraft, about spirits, about the land. We're going to talk about the cycles of nature and what they mean. We'll talk about our dreams and visions. We'll nourish our spirits with wisdom from the old lore. Beyond the crackling fire's glow, the shadows lingering between the trees could almost be our ancestors. Right there from that very first paragraph, Horne is he's inviting you into his world. And he's talking about his favorite setting for conversations of this type. He just paints a picture that exudes that exudes this vibe of mysterious and captivating, but also warm and welcoming at the same time. Sitting around a campfire telling stories, that's one of the most natural things for us to do as humans. It's one of the places where we build friendships and even build a sense of fellowship and community. And all of us, almost all of us, in some way, shape, or form, love sitting around the campfire telling stories. And sitting around a campfire on a cool autumn night, just a little bit of a chill in the air makes you appreciate the fire a little bit more. It's actually something I'm looking forward to in the upcoming months, because let me tell you, where I live, it is hotter than that spot between Satan's nutsack and his asshole. It is sweltering. Okay, enough with my bitching and griping about that. I do that on a daily basis here lately because it has been atrocious. But let's move on, and maybe Horne can help me escape to the autumn campfire for a little while. In many ways, we are living in the golden age of witchcraft. New traditions are springing up all around us. Writers, bloggers, and vloggers share their approaches and ideas. Scholars have begun to unpack the old lore through the lens of legitimate spiritual experience. Books on the craft are published every day. These modern grammars usually share the author's rituals, their charms, their holidays, and provide a step-by-step approach to conducting craft workings. They try to explain what witches do, what they believe, how they conduct their rituals, what rules they should follow. Sometimes they offer a spurious account of witch history and lineage that leaves the reader more puzzled than before. These books provide much of the how, but little of the why. Pre-made models and rituals that are practiced without an understanding of their source are like cut flowers. They are beautiful on the kitchen table, but quickly wither away. Now, what he's getting at there, and I ran across this too throughout my path, not to say that any of these other books that have been available were bad, but so many of the books available were sort of like and I, again, I don't mean to speak ill of other people's work, and I apologize if it comes across this way, because it's not a a non-constructive criticism. It's just an observation. For the longest time, it felt like most of the books on witchcraft, they read more like cookbooks and scripts, like a script for a play. And so you got a lot of the how-to, but like Horne is saying, you didn't get a lot of the why. And the why can be very important. And what he, later on in the introduction, which there's only a little bit more left, so I'm going to paraphrase it here. He goes on to talk about how he started this book because he wanted to write the kind of book that he really wanted to find when he was first starting out. And that's a very admirable goal. And I think if you're going to write a Witchcraft 101 book, that is probably about the best mindset to enter that undertaking with. What book would you have found the most valuable and the most effective? And then that's the book you need to write. And this book has resonated very deeply with many people since it was written. This, by the way, is the second edition. There was a first edition. See if I can find the publication dates in here. Looks like 2019 is the first copyright, and then 2021 is the second one. And 2021 is when I picked this up. And as you can see, it's kind of dented and dinged up, and it's got stains on the pages. even on the, you can see on the bottom of the spine, I spilt coffee there. You can always look in my library and tell which books have been used the most because they're beat up and they usually have wine or coffee stains on them. And wine when I was using them for ritual, and coffee because I was reading them over drinking coffee with my breakfast, or having some coffee in the afternoon, as I'm prone to do. Other than nicotine, my other vice is definitely caffeine. If I were to quit drinking coffee, I'm pretty sure my cardiovascular system would just seize. Now, the way and the rest of the introduction, aside from making that statement that he sought out to write the kind of book he wanted for himself when he first started out, he goes on to explain how the book is arranged and how it's structured, and guide you through how to use this book. And we're going to briefly kind of go over it. And I'm not going to read this entire book over the course of our Sundee services, but what I want to do is just kind of cherry pick some of the pieces that were particularly meaningful and helpful to me, and read them to you, and then explain why they were helpful to me, or why they were particularly meaningful to me. And hopefully somewhere along the way, if you don't have a copy of this in your library, hopefully you'll decide to pick it up and give it a shot. So the way this book is structured, it has the first three sections are lore, land, and the familiar spirit. And so each of these sections has a various number of essays or articles that are appropriate to whatever heading they fall under. Then after those sections, we go into his grammar. And that's what he calls, other witches would call it a grimoire, book of shadows. But but he uses the term grammar because it is related to the term grimoire. And he also does later go on to explain his reasons for using that word. And it basically means how to. So, and then the grammar he provides is divided up into sections of its own: basic rites, Sabbat rites, conjurations, and then a collection of various charms. But the meat of the book would be the lore, the land, and the familiar spirit. And then periodically throughout, he will usually provide a section with questions. I lost one of my bookmarks, but I kept this section marked because I'm currently working on journaling with these particular ideas that he presents. But he'll ask you a series of questions to prompt your thinking and prompt your direction. So in that little bit we read where he talks about how a lot of books didn't address the why, he gives his own ideas as to the why, but he's encouraging you to define the why for yourself. So it's not so much why did witches of the past do what they did, why are you doing it? Examining your own motives. And I think that's a healthy thing for all of us to do. So with that being said, let's check out, let's read the first paragraph of the section on lore before we close out for the day. Witchcraft is an old art, and witches love feeling connected to something antiquated and vast, something ancient. Since the modern witchcraft boom of the last century, many writers have put forward claims of authenticity in their lore and traditions, often disputed by scholars. The question of historicity need not be a headache, though. In fact, for the folk witch, connection to the past is everywhere. Folk witchcraft is something we do, and it is sourced in our survived lore and charms. The folk witch does not claim to belong to an ancient cultus or an organized religion, but identifies as the inheritor of the specific trappings of our art. The stories, spirits, charms, talismans, incantations, herbs, holy days, and legends handed down to us through the ages. So he's and he's addressing something very valid here, especially in the especially in the mid part of the 20th century. Several people started coming forward with some pretty out there claims as far as being initiated into some sort of ancient mystery cult with a lineage centuries old. And of course, the first name that comes to mind is Gerald Gardner, his story about the New Forest Coven of Witches and his initiation experience. But I can assure you he was not the only person making those types of claims. And Horne is saying that we don't need to connect ourselves to some unbroken chain of literal initiation in order to be connected to something ancient. We just need to pick up the lore and the working tools and continue the work. One need not be initiated into a line of we'll put this example in a different context. One need not be initiated into a specific line of woodworkers to take up the work of a carpenter. One need only a working knowledge and the right tools. And the craft of the witch is no different. We don't need to be initiated into covens with several centuries worth of lineage. That where you come from doesn't have any bearing on your capabilities and your effectiveness. What you do does. And as he said, Folk witchcraft is something we do. It's not something. It's not something that. I'm trying to find the right words here, and they're eluding me. It's not necessarily something we claim. A lot of people can talk a big talk, and can make some pretty outrageous claims, but at the end of the day, what do they do? Because that's what matters. And that's where I'll leave us off for today, and I will start picking some of the sections from out of the or some of the essays out of the lore section that I found particularly meaningful. We'll go over them together, and we'll do the same thing for the sections that follow. And again, I hope if you don't already have this book in your collection, I really hope you decide to add it by the time we're done discussing it. For now, let's talk to the cards, shall we? And this week's card is the Seven of Diamonds. In the tradition of cartomancy that I utilize most, seven's not the most positive number, but it is a challenge more so than a damnation. Sevens are a fork in the road, a choice between a 5 and a 2. The 5 being a disastrous end, and this being diamonds, the suit of things we value, things that are important to us. We have a choice between 5, which is like bankruptcy, ruining yourself, and 2, starting over with a different with a different direction, taking a chance on something new versus definite ruin. And just because we value something doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about money here. Please bear that in mind. When we talk about things of value, that's something that a lot of people jump to. We're not always talking about money. We're talking about things that you're investing your time, your interest in, and could be financial resources too, as well. But sometimes we have to choose between continuing to follow a path that we know is going to lead us to ruin, or facing the unknown and starting over. That's a tough call, because there's so many of us that would much rather deal with the misery we know and we can predict, because there's comfort in familiarity. There's comfort in predictability, even when what we know and what we predict can be toxic and non-productive. It's nowhere near as scary as taking that jump into the unknown. But then we got to ask ourselves, is the risk of facing the unknown really worse than continuing to do something that's not giving anything back to us? We can either self-medicate in some way and deny the ineffectiveness of the current choice of action, and just kind of keep sitting there and letting things continue to get worse until they boil to a head and we have to deal with it, and usually erupt into violent explosions. Or we can finally just get honest with ourselves about the nature of the situation. If we're doing something over and over again and it's not working, It's time to try something different. It's time to suck it up, face the unknown, and try a different path. There's a saying that I was introduced to at a very young age. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. So if you continue going down that road of that's not taking you anywhere, that's draining you mentally, physically, emotionally, financially, and it's not improving the quality of your life, it's actually taking quality away, it's always going to do that. No amount of persistence is going to change that. And again, sometimes you just got to suck it up, face the unknown, and start over. With that, friends and kin, I hope you have a wonderful week. And provided I have no more technological missteps or anything else getting in the way, I will see you next Sunday.